The Chernobyl disaster occurred at a nuclear power plant in a city known as Pripyat in Ukraine in the former Soviet Union. The power plant consisted of 4 reactors. Each reactor was capable of producing 1,000 megawatts of electric power. On April 25, 1986, technicians working at Reactor 4 were performing a poorly designed experiment. The technicians shut down the reactor's power and emergency systems while withdrawing most control rods from the core and allowed the reactor to continue running at 7%. This mistake, compounded with several others, caused a chain reaction in the core and caused several explosions, knocking off the steel and concrete lids of the reactors on April 26, 1986 at 1:23 a.m., killing 2 people immediately and causing radiation poisoning to many others. This released large amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The radioactive material was spread further by air currents and reached as far as Sweden.
When looking at ethical issues, we follow the principles of EGAD, which go over ethics, generating alternative decisions, analyzing those decisions, and coming to a decision. The parties involved in this case were the government, the technical personnel, public, and possibly surrounding countries. We can now analyze ethical issues from the perspective of a professional engineer by looking at the Professional Engineering Act. The government, by Section 77.2I, failed to put the public needs as paramount by lacking regulation for nuclear power plants. They were also negligent in the life, health, and property of the public because they failed to evacuate the public immediately. This goes against Section 72.2A to B. The technical personnel undertook work that they were not trained to do. This goes against Section 72.2G. They also failed to comply with regulations and rules that were in connection with their work, which goes against 72.2D. They also failed, in most cases, to report consequences of deviation to their employer. One exception being one engineer who went back to his superior to tell him of the consequences of the experiment, but his superior told him to perform the experiment anyways. We can now generate and analyze alternative actions. The government could have ignored regulating the power plant, have minimal regulation, or have a high amount of regulation. The government should have at least had a minimal amount of regulation so that they could ensure that the public's needs were placed as paramount and the nuclear power plant was in safe and working order. They also could have informed the public of the disaster and evacuate, or not inform them, but evacuate anyways. The government, regardless of the decision, should have evacuated the people so that they could follow 72.2A to B and protect the public's life, health, and property. The technical personnel could have informed higher up of the potential risks. They should have done this because they failed to meet 72.2F. They also should have followed proper procedure and training guidelines, which goes against 72.2G and D. To summarize our decision, the government needs to enforce and make sure there is an appropriate level of regulation. They also need to inform the public of the disaster. The technical personnel need to inform their higher-ups of potential and current complications. They need to follow regulation and need to follow all training guidelines of all devices used.
This case is an example of unintentional tort. Tort law has 3 key principles that must be satisfied. 1. The defendant owed the plaintiff a duty of care. 2. The defendant breached his duty by his or her conduct. And 3. The defendant caused the plaintiff damages. For tort law, the defendant and plaintiff does not need to be in a contractual relationship. For this case, the defendants are the team responsible for the test and the team responsible for safety precautions of the nuclear reactor. The plaintiff here are the public. From our analysis, the Chernobyl accident was a consequence of incompetence to operate. For the test to be successful, the reactor needed to be stabilized at 700 to 1,000 megawatt thermal before shutdown. However, from a probable miscommunication between the personnel in charge of the test and the personnel responsible for the reactor's safety precautions, the power dropped to 30 megawatts thermal. To increase power level, control rods were withdrawn until 8 were left. However, the minimum allowed number of rods was 15. A sudden power surge increased the power to 530 megawatts thermal and was continuously increasing. Fuel channels began to rupture, which generated large amounts of steam, causing the reactor to explode. Operating a nuclear power plant is nothing to be taken lightly. Both teams should have made sure to be on the same page and followed proper safety and testing procedures. They breached this duty of care by their careless actions failing to meet testing and safety standards, hence resulting in causing the public severe damages. In conclusion, this case is an example of concurrent tortfeasors, where the personnel operating the test and the team responsible for the safety precautions of the nuclear reactor are liable for the damages caused to the public. Unfortunately, the plaintiff's damages are not recoverable from the defendants, as many lives are lost and many homes will not be able to be returned to.
Our group believed that PEO would have made the same decision as the World Health Organization did in 1986, of sealing the nuclear reactor and abandoning the city. By sealing the reactor, it caused the radiation to stop spreading. The dome that was built to seal the radiation was as tall as the Liberty State Building and as long as the Titanic. Abandoning the city was also needed since the land had experienced an extreme dose of radiation and is unsustainable for any life to be living within a 30-kilometer radius from the power plant. From this disaster, the world realized how dangerous having a nuclear power plant is. The radiation that leaked into the air caused damages that is not irreplaceable to fix. Because of this catastrophic event, scientists and engineers have realized how important it is to have maintained and confined radiation. The Chernobyl event has shown the world a demonstration of human mistakes and how largely it can affect our lives. From this disaster, nuclear power plants around the world became more regulated in hopes for it to never happen again.